This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Laychuk. Janet is off tonight. Crisis response workers are in St. Teresa Point First Nation to help the community deal with the deaths of two young teens. It is a tragedy that leaders say is impacting the entire small community. CBC's Brittany Greenslade reports.
It's a small northern community that's been left in mourning. The deaths of two 14-year-old girls Wednesday morning has those in St. Teresa Point First Nation struggling.
It is very devastating, and especially to the families and, the students, especially the students, they have friends, and that's kind of hard to comprehend.
RCMP say the two teens were taken to the nursing station after being found outside a home at 8 a.m. The temperatures had dropped down to a frigid and unforgiving -23 overnight. Police believe weather played a significant role in their deaths and say they weren't dressed for the conditions.
The investigation is kind of siding on an exposure type fatality. We want to confirm, though, with the autopsy to make sure there's nothing else that could factor into why both these girls were found outside.
RCMP say they're still trying to piece together where the girls were in the hours before they were found, but tell CBC News they were with a group of friends the night before.
The investigation has to focus on exactly, from point A to point B, at what time, what kind of time frame are we looking at, who's all involved. There's lots of little pieces of the puzzle that need to be confirmed.
Crisis response workers have flown into the community to offer supports. With just over 3,000 people living there, everyone is connected, which makes these deaths hit even harder.
It's hard to lose one, but then when you lose two the same age, in the same way, the families, the community wants answers.
RCMP say they hope they can provide some quickly. Brittany Greenslade, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Meantime, another tragedy in northern Manitoba could also be linked to exposure. A 28-year-old woman died after being outside for 12 hours near South Indian Lake. She and a 31-year-old man left the community northwest of Thompson by snowmobile on Tuesday afternoon, but it broke down and the pair was left stranded. The man walked for several hours back to town while the woman waited. He got another man to drive him back to the woman on a new snowmobile, and all three got back to South Indian Lake around 3 o'clock in the morning. That's when the men noticed the woman had become unresponsive. She was taken to a local nursing station and pronounced dead. An autopsy has been scheduled. We have an update to a story we brought you here at 6 last night. The Winnipeg Regional Health Authority says it never had any plans to discharge an elderly patient to a homeless shelter. The family of an 83-year-old retired nurse said Thursday that the Victoria Hospital had threatened to send the woman to the Main Street Project. The WRHA says the patient in question is not homeless and there were never any plans to send her to a shelter. The budget review process is now underway at Winnipeg City Hall. It is City Council's last chance to get items into the budget before it receives final approval. First up, the Public Works Committee held a special meeting today. CBC's Cameron McLean has more on one item on the agenda, a study that will look at reducing transit fares to $1.
Here at City Hall, the Public Works Committee is hearing arguments on what should be included and left out of the budget. Earlier this morning, Point Douglas Councillor Vivian Santos urged the committee to look at ways of reducing transit fares. This is an idea Santos has been pushing for years. In the past, city administrators have told her it would be too complicated. So now she's asking for funding to hire a consultant to look at how other cities have brought in discounted transit fares.
Not everyone is able to afford a two-way $6 bus fare, so we need to stop seeing that bus fare as a revenue generator. Transit is a public good.
The head of the transit union told the committee today that reducing fares could improve driver safety by cutting down on conflicts with passengers. But committee chair Janice Lukes questioned whether transit can afford it, considering it's already facing a budget shortfall.
Things that right now, today, are going on in transit, that it might not be the best time to do it. I'm not saying it's not a good idea. I'm just saying there's a lot of things that we need to do to stabilize transit.
Another proposal would fund active transportation projects as part of road renewals. Cyclists and pedestrians have called for the city to make active transportation improvements whenever it digs up a road to do repairs. But the head of the Heavy Construction Association says the city should find another funding source.
Since 2013-14, successive councils and successive mayors have been saying, folks, we're raising your taxes by 2 points to fix our local and regional streets. Yeah. Stick to that principle.
The committee is still in discussions and likely will be until late this evening. Due to the large amount on the agenda, the committee will hold a second meeting on March 15th to deal with items related to transit. Council will hold a final vote on the budget on March 22nd. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A 22-year-old man is facing charges after 4 young men were randomly attacked. It happened Wednesday afternoon in the area of Fort and Graham. Police say the victims ranged in age from 19 to 23 years old. All but one of them had minor injuries, but one of them was knocked unconscious and lost a tooth in the assault. A 22-year-old man was arrested not long after near Main and St. Mary Avenue. Investigators believe the man randomly approached the victims and began attacking them without provocation. He is facing assault charges and has been released from custody. A rally for LGBTQ safety took over the front lawn of the University of Winnipeg this afternoon. It was held in response to a lecture given by one of the school's professors, which some worried could contain transphobic themes. As CBC's Josh Crabb reports, the decision to allow it did not sit well with demonstrators.
Trans rights are human rights.
More than 100 people attended the rally Friday over the noon hour on the grounds of the University of Winnipeg. It was organized by the Student Association's 2S LGBTQ+ director, Brie Villeneuve, in response to a lecture given by a political science professor.
I ask, where do you draw the line between academic freedom and the safety of your students?
A poster advertised the talk titled The Commodification of the Human Body, The Case of Transgender Identities by Joanne Boucher. It stated the lecture would include a focus on economic interests involved in transgenderism, a word members of the trans community view as a red flag and one they do not use.
And the use of transgenderism is often used by anti-trans individuals to claim that our identities are ideologies and not real.
Inside the school, another show of solidarity. People shared readings, support, and ate cupcakes.
The University of Winnipeg says it didn't cancel the talk because it's committed to fostering an environment where freedom exists to question and discuss issues using a respectful and scholarly approach. But the professor who organized this gathering in response to that talk going ahead says academic freedom is no justification for allowing it.
And so with that privilege comes a responsibility to not spread intolerance or misinformation.
Boucher declined an interview. CBC observed her talk, which was moved online by the university to minimize disruptions on campus. The professor was asked if she was concerned about holding her talk amid legislation in the U.S. seeking to restrict or ban access to trans health care. She told the audience academics have a right to study things they want to study, but that reasoning doesn't sit well with student Indy Dufour, who wanted the talk canceled.
We've been panicking over this because the last thing that we want is for people to be hearing this.
The organizer of the rally now wants a meeting with the university to discuss the harm they say the talk has caused the trans community. Josh Crabb, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Well, $10 a day soon. That will be the maximum that Manitoba families pay for childcare in this province. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Premier Heather Stephenson made that announcement in Winnipeg today. CBC's Alana Cole has the details.
This is big news for families, and it comes 3 years ahead of schedule.
Hi, how are you? Nice to see you.
Today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, alongside Premier Heather Stephenson, announced as of April 2nd, families in this province will pay a maximum of $10 at regulated nonprofit childcare centers.
We just met with a number of parents here at the YMCA. For example, Brenda and Peter told me they're now saving hundreds of dollars a month, which are savings that can be used for groceries, other bills, or after-school activities, and it's making a real difference in their lives.
He says he spent 2 weeks doing town halls across the country, and one of the things that continues to come up is concerns about the rising cost of living. Stephenson says this plan applies to kids aged 12 and under.
As a government, we recognize that many Manitoba families are struggling to make ends meet. This partnership and our significant investments will save Manitoba families thousands of dollars a year in childcare fees.
Stephenson says her government's childcare subsidy program will further reduce fees for families who need it. She says Manitoba remains committed to creating thousands of childcare spots. The province says there's a plan to add 23,000 more spaces by 2026. The executive director of the Manitoba Childcare Association told CBC today's announcement is great news, but says there are still issues around compensation for staff, recruiting and retention. The province says they're working on a plan to expand post-secondary training. Alana Cole, CBC News, Winnipeg.
While in Winnipeg today, the Prime Minister also faced more questions about allegations China interfered in Canada's last 2 federal elections. Trudeau told reporters his government has been fighting back against election meddling since it was first elected in 2015.
Even as we were seeing increased election interference around the world, in places like France or the United States or elsewhere, democracies subject to foreign interference, we knew that we had to create mechanisms to respond to that because Canada had very few, if any, mechanisms to counter interference in our democracies when we took office.
Trudeau repeated his stand that there was meddling, but it did not affect the outcome of the votes. He has neither endorsed nor rejected calls for a public inquiry into the matter. The company behind a new prairie processing plant has landed in receivership. Merit Functional Foods owes tens of millions of dollars to its secured lenders. The processing facility in Winnipeg derives protein from both canola and peas. The plant just opened in 2021. In an online note, Merit CEO Ryan Bracken says the company struggled to get to the level of cash flow needed to operate the business profitably quick enough. The province could not say how many employees will be affected and how many have been laid off. And the Grey Cup is returning to Winnipeg. The championship game was last here in 2015. The Canadian press is reporting via sources that the league will award the 2025 Grey Cup to Winnipeg later this month, although that is something the CFL has not yet formally unveiled. Manitoba officials have estimated that the host Grey Cup would add $90 million to the economy and provide $8.2 million in provincial tax revenue. The provincial government offered up to $5.5 million to help with a Grey Cup bid for Winnipeg. Meteorologist John Sauder is with us today, and I was walking to work at about 3 o'clock this afternoon, and I was enjoying that sunshine.
Enjoying the
sunshine. It was so nice out there today.
Perfect CFL football weather outside.
Yeah.
Well, maybe in November.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, it sure felt like spring. A bright, clear sky out there. Not much to show you on satellite. A little bit of snow across the north. Let's get to the details. First, starting with Winnipeg. We're now at -3. The winds have gone calm, and pressure is 100.1 and starting to rise a little bit. So we don't really have a wind chill with a calm wind. Nice clear skies, so you'll see the in the western sky in just a little while, maybe another hour or so, you'll see Venus and Jupiter a little farther apart than they were last night, but you'll see that in the west. Now, I mentioned the clear sky here across the south and the snow in the north. 2 to maybe 5 centimeters in some locations today across northern Manitoba. It will continue to snow a little bit through the evening hours. I'm not expecting too much more in the way of accumulation, but we'll get to that in just a second with a look at the forecast amounts. And you can still see on Futurecast, the forecast model at least indicating some of that snow still happening through the night tonight. Tomorrow's chance is about 30% across northern Manitoba. Here in the south, I'm expecting sunny skies. Now, yesterday, Futurecast showed us this kind of image for today, and I find that at this time of year, this particular model is a little pessimistic on, the cloud cover. It sort of gives us more cloud than what really ends up happening. So it does show that cloud breaking up a little bit in the afternoon. I would count on more sunshine tomorrow than cloud, southern half of the province, and really not much of a chance of a flurry. And temperatures around -1 to even 0 or so. So with light winds, Saturday is just going to be an absolute gem. Across the north, we'll have a little bit of light snow, but like I say, about a 30% chance. And then again on Sunday, kind of a sun-cloud mix, but eyes to the south on Sunday, because here's a look at 4:30 in the afternoon. Major snowstorm moving through North Dakota, off into Minnesota Sunday night into Monday morning. That is going to miss southern Manitoba. But what it leaves behind is some very gusty north winds. You'll notice them shifting to the north late on Sunday. By Monday morning, we are north 40, gusting to 60 kilometers per hour. It is going to be a little bit cooler as well. In the next 24 hours, 1 to maybe 2 centimeters across much of the north. So that's tonight's snow, and it includes that chance of snow tomorrow, maybe upwards of about 4 centimeters in Gillam. With the clear sky tonight, -13, -12 in the morning, and then the afternoon, I think skating trails, ski trails, snowmobile trails, everything wintry and outside is going to be very busy. South winds are light, and the afternoon temperature at -1. -3 Sunday. Look how much cooler next week. It's going to feel really cool at -8 for a high on Monday, with winds gusting out of the north, Riley, to 60 kilometers per hour. So especially in the morning, it's going to be a little raw.
That -1 tomorrow, though, almost shorts weather for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, John.
You bet.
Manitoba has become the latest province to clamp down on the popular social media app TikTok. The province is banning the app on all government-issued devices by Monday of next week. It says it is a precautionary measure. Now, there have been growing fears across the country that the Chinese-run app is a risk to privacy and security. We'll speak with a local expert about TikTok and the safety of your own data just ahead. But first, CBC's Amibola Odeni spoke with people and asked them about the use of the social media app and how they're feeling about the risks.
I know our kids like it.
Our kids like it, yeah. I think they spend a little too much time on it, so I'm kind of a little biased against it.
Honestly, after the first quarantine back in 2020, there was not much to do, and so TikTok was the new app, and I hopped on it, and I pretty much got addicted.
Why do you like TikTok?
It's fun. It feeds my brain useless information and videos.
They could have taken so many things. So at this point, I don't really do too much to protect myself that way.
I don't know. I don't really think about it. I think if they were to have my information, it'd be useless to them.
I'm all for apps and technology and everything being banned for the right reasons. My concern always when it comes down to certain technologies, that it becomes a political issue.
For me, I don't really keep a lot of personal information on my social media profiles, other than pictures and stuff. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of our data is constantly being taken by other platforms, so I kind of feel very apathetic to it, whatever.
My favorite new social media app, so I would be really upset if it was banned, but I mean, it's probably justified though.
I mean, it's TikTok again, so it's whatever, but I feel like something else would come along and take its place if it did get banned, at least in Canada.
TikTok disappeared tomorrow, I certainly wouldn't be too sad about it.
For more about TikTok and data safety, I want to bring on Gautam Srivastava. He is a professor of computer science at Brandon University. First, I want to ask you, governments are one thing, but the average person is probably not worried about something like espionage, for example. Should the average user be worried about having the TikTok app on their devices?
I don't think so. TikTok is a user-friendly application. There's been no compromised situations with TikTok. They've never been attacked. They've never had data security leaks. So I think the average user is pretty safe using TikTok at this point.
I mean, one concern that has come up in the past, just broadly speaking, is something like clipboard monitoring. Can you explain what that is and why people should be worried about it?
Yeah, so clipboard monitoring is basically a lot of times on our devices for ease of use and not having to type a lot, we copy information from one application to another. So say we got an email about something and we copy that into another application, or someone texts us something to look up and we copy it and then we paste it into Google. Every time we copy it, it gets stored on the clipboard. And so when it's stored on the clipboard, that is an unsecured area of our phone. Apps oftentimes do something called clipboard monitoring, where they're periodically checking the clipboard for new information. They pull it, and then they use it to create a better user profile about you to make your experience on their application a lot more smooth and a lot more user-friendly. And so there is some risk there because a lot of people tend to copy passwords or copy email addresses that they use with passwords. And so this could be information that could be monitored by an application, and then when sold to a third party, then there is some inherent risk there for users.
Right, and that brings me to my next question. We always joke about something like our phones, for example, listening to us, showing us links for something that we just mentioned in a conversation with someone. Can you explain how this works and how you prevent this from happening?
There's a couple things that applications tend to do. So when you install a fresh application on your phone and you use it for the first time, depending on what parts of your phone the app needs access to. So if the app needs access to your contacts, if it needs access to your camera, if it needs access to your microphone, it will request you to grant application to that microphone, camera, whatever. And there's usually 3 options given to you. Always, only when the app is open, and never. Never, most people won't pick because then the app becomes pretty much useless and you won't be able to use it. The other 2 are kind of a trick question because always would grant the application access to that microphone or camera all the time. And just when the app is open is probably the best choice. However, a lot of people with social media applications tend to have the application running in the background. And so then with the application open, they can still get data out of your camera or your microphone or when you're typing, and use that again to create a better profile about you for the application.
Right. So how do users, both young and old, how do we protect ourselves when we're using not just TikTok, but really any other social media platform?
I would suggest people that are using different social media platforms, first of all, only have the applications installed on your phone that you're actively all the time using. If there's some social media platform that you consider yourself done with or you don't want to use anymore, you should probably uninstall it from your phone, because even though it's not active, it may be running processes in the background and still creating a user profile about you, even if you're not using the application. The other thing you should do is only have the applications open on your phone or device when you're actually using it. And so what that means is if you're not using the application, make sure that it's actually closed on your phone and not running in the background. So a lot of phones will have this window that you can pull up that kind of shows all the different things that are currently running. Make sure that the application is closed there when you're not using the application. Because just remember, anytime the application is running in the background, you're kind of still giving it permission to log information from the parts of your phone that you've already given it access to. And so this can be detrimental to users if they want to protect themselves fully from these applications mining or farming information about them.
Right. Some very good information, some very good tips. Gautam Srivastava, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Still ahead for us tonight, police have busted a large human trafficking ring in Ontario. We'll have the details of that story just ahead. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. Police in Ontario say they have broken up a Toronto area human trafficking ring that was exploiting people for labor. They say 64 people from Mexico were forced to work at farms, at factories, and at warehouses. The CBC's Ali Chiasson reports.
In early February, police executed search warrants of different properties in Toronto and the GTA. Investigators located dozens of workers who they say were lured to Canada.
Our members were shocked at the conditions that the victims were living in.
Described as squalid and cramped, some were in cold farmhouses. In total, 64 Mexican men and women were rescued.
They also described forms of coercion and control, which included isolation, a lack of freedom, being financially bound, threats, and sexual assault.
These workers are coerced with promises of a better life, decent wages, quality housing, and eventually documentation. These are almost always false promises.
Instead, they toiled in factories, warehouses, and on farms.
Fueron condiciones difíciles y duras, ambientes laborales.
CBC News spoke to a man who was a victim of this trafficking ring. He had responded to an online ad for work in Canada. Soon enough, he was working on a farm packing fruit while living in a house with 40 other people.
Realmente era algo difícil. Era algo difícil por la situación de que había mucha basura. Había colchones solamente en los cuartos donde dormíamos hasta 2 por colchones individuales, donde pasábamos frío.
We've granted the man anonymity as he fears deportation. He managed to get out before the Project Norte raid, which resulted in the arrests of 5 people, 2 Canadians and 3 Mexicans. 2 suspects are outstanding. As for the workers or temporary foreign worker agencies that could also be implicated in this,
That part of the investigation is still being looked into. It has become a bit of a web, so just trying to unravel that web to really understand the full story.
the Canada Border Service Agency says the rescued workers do not face deportation as they are victims of a crime. Meanwhile, the man who escaped this human trafficking ring hopes that Project Norte becomes the catalyst for dismantling migrant worker exploitation.
Principalmente que tuvieran cuidado. Ahora sí que de estas personas que abusan de la necesidad del mexicano, ¿no? Y de un sueño canadiense, porque te prometen papeles, te prometen...
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
A massive case of art fraud involving millions of dollars in one of Canada's greatest Indigenous artists has been uncovered in Ontario. Investigators have seized 1,000 paintings. They say criminals were selling them as original works by Norval Morrisseau. 8 people are now facing dozens of forgery charges, and as CBC's Talia Ricci reports, police call it the biggest art fraud case in the world.
All Indians should be happy to be Indians for that simple reason, that they have that spirit within themselves.
Norval Morrisseau is an Indigenous art legend. His work can be seen in galleries across Canada and the globe. He was also the victim of what OPP say is the largest art fraud case in world history.
These are not small, victimless crimes. These are people that took advantage of one man's legacy in order to turn a profit for themselves. Make no mistake, these were coordinated and intentional efforts. These people duped the public and made a profit doing so.
More than 1,000 allegedly fake paintings, prints, and other artworks were seized in an investigation that has gone on for 2.5 years. 8 people face a total of 40 charges. 5 were from Thunder Bay, and 1 is the artist's nephew. Police believe more fakes are out there.
Through the investigation, we believe there's between 4,500 and 6,000 fraudulent paintings that were created in Norval's name. The math on that is around $100 million. It is by far the biggest art fraud in world history.
This is what I'm going to paint.
Morrisseau was a self-taught Anishinaabe artist who's considered the first contemporary Indigenous artist to break into the mainstream art world. Police believe people have been creating and selling art under his name and his distinctive Woodland School of Art style since before his death in 2007.
Many Indigenous artists now are
standing on the shoulders of Norval Morso and Daphne Ojig and other artists of that era.
Jamie Kastner produced and directed the documentary There Are No Fakes, which takes a deep dive into the art forgery ring in this case.
It's so rare in our business that you can see your work generating real-world quantifiable results. The arrest list that was released today reads like a cast list of the film for the most part. So it's really exciting and gratifying, since this was such a horrible crime on so many levels that went far beyond art fraud.
Despite the enormous scope of the fraud and the investigation, police and artists say it's important that his legacy isn't clouded by crime.
The legacy of Norval Morso must remain that he challenged mainstream views of Indigenous peoples in his time, and he succeeded in raising awareness and breaking down barriers.
He brought the paintings out to reveal to the world that Indigenous art was still alive and still vital, and he gifted it to the young artists of his day.
Now, police say they aren't in a position to authenticate art, so anyone who believes they may be in possession of one of these fraudulent pieces, police recommend reaching out to a lawyer. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Orillia.
Well, on the front lines of the war in Ukraine, Russia is inching closer to its first significant victory since the earliest days of its invasion. Russian troops and mercenaries have been raining artillery on the last remaining access routes to the besieged city of Bakhmut. Russian mercenaries known as the Wagner Group say it was Ukrainian troops that destroyed this bridge in an effort to slow the Russian advance. The leaders of the mercenaries say Bakhmut is nearly surrounded. Ukrainian officials say the city has little strategic value, but the Russians see it as a stepping stone to capturing a larger section of the surrounding Donbass region. Both sides have taken heavy losses in the battle. The number of soldiers being killed in the fighting in Ukraine is vague at best. Neither side is providing precise figures, and in Russia, there are strong suspicions that the official casualty counts are so low, they're not believable. CBC's Briar Stewart has been talking with some groups and individuals who are working to reveal the true toll.
When Vitaly Vatanovsky walks through crowded cemeteries filled with the graves of Russian fighters, the former Air Force officer stays silent. The images speak for themselves. They were healthy men who could contribute to the state, he says. They're lying in the ground now. Some headstones reveal soldiers as young as 19. I want people to understand the scale of the catastrophe we're now experiencing, which he believes the Russian government is hiding. Officials rarely issue updates. The last was in September when they said 6,000 had been killed. A group of Russian volunteers and journalists say they know the toll is much higher. They've created a database of the dead by combing through social media and obituaries.
In the last week, we had 15,000 confirmed death, and we believe that the real number is 2 or 3 times higher.
Maxim Litavrin says the database doesn't include the missing or any deaths they've been unable to confirm. He says so many Russians have been killed recently that they needed to find more volunteers to help. Even though the number of coffins keeps growing, Litavrin doesn't see a shift in the country's attitude towards the war.
For some reason, the Russian propaganda is working.
Karina Pronina admits she sometimes feels dismayed. This is one of the news pieces she put together in Baracha, a region in eastern Siberia that's seen a disproportionate number of deaths. While trying to report, she was arrested at a cemetery. After being later warned that police were coming for her, Pronina fled Russia, but her work hasn't stopped. We're trying to do something. Our only weapon is to make things public, she says. And that's how Vatanovsky feels. He's been threatened and was even sent this picture from someone saying a grave was being prepared for him. But he says he has no plans to stop posting about what he's seeing in these cemeteries. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
A court in Belarus has sentenced last year's Nobel Peace Prize winner to 10 years in prison. Alice Belyatsky was convicted of smuggling money and funding anti-government protests. Belyatsky calls the charges political and baseless. He won the Nobel Award for promoting democracy and human rights in Belarus. He was jailed amid protests that accused President Alexander Lukashenko of rigging the 2020 election. The UN's human rights watchdog says fair trial proceedings were absent. Coming up, a new film tells the life story of the first black woman to sit in Parliament. Yesterday, a group of kids from across Manitoba got the special opportunity to meet Jean Augustine at a private screening of the film Steadfast. We'll have more after the break. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. A new film called Steadfast tells the life story of the first black woman to sit in Parliament. During her 12-year political career, Jean Augustine advocated for women's rights and the rights of black Canadians, most notably supporting legislation that helped recognize Black History Month in Canada. Yesterday, a group of kids from across Manitoba got the special opportunity to meet Augustine at a private screening ceremony. CBC community reporter Chidi Ikuma has more.
I need to say who I'm talking about. I'm sure you know.
2023, Black History Month in Canada. The theme for that month is our stories to tell, ours to tell. And we must tell those stories. I must know your story. We must know each other's story so we could learn from each other.
When you were a little girl, did you ever imagine what your life would be, your experiences at all?
I don't think anybody at a very young age visualizes what their life would be at 85. I'm now 85. But I knew that I wanted a little bit more than there was in Grenada at the time. I wanted an education. I wanted the opportunity to do good things. I was raised on the whole notion of service. I taught social studies. There was nothing in the modules that spoke about Indigenous peoples, about land claims, residential schools, treaties. So I knew nothing. And at the same time, I was part of the African Canadian community. And I wanted to know a little bit more. Who was the first African Canadian who came to Canada? What communities did they build? What things were happening? None of that was in the modules that I taught. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And so the motion that I put together spoke to, and it's a very small motion. It says, we were here. We have been making contributions. We are a diverse African Canadian community, and therefore ask that Parliament designate Black History Month in Canada.
The show was really inspiring because of how her life, and she had to go through so much. After seeing that video, I didn't know who she was until now, but now that I do, I respect her a lot.
I really thought it was empowering because I am transgender, and this woman was up there talking about women and Black people, and I thought as she said, we need to continue to work so that everybody is included.
Even when things get hard, you should always push yourself to limit and set goals and know that anything could happen and anything's possible.
And when you think back to that little girl, what would she think of your accomplishments and the life you've lived?
I think that little girl would be surprised and at the same time pleased and proud that we've been able to accomplish so much.
All right, John Sauder is back with us now. You know, I really enjoyed the sunshine here in the city and across southern Manitoba, but you're saying the snow is looking at some more snow again.
Yeah,
the north is looking at some more snow.
Yeah,
that's what I mean.
Winter's just kind of hanging on a little bit in northern Manitoba, about 2 to maybe 5 centimeters in some locations today. A little bit more tonight. I'll go through the details here in a second. I'm going to start with some current temperatures, though, across southern Manitoba. So here we go, -3 at the airport. You look at the western edge of the Red River Valley, areas like Eli and Portage, getting up to 1 and 2 today. Downtown, we're still at -2. That's the best we did in the Winnipeg area. But all of these numbers, or most of them anyway, even as we sit right now just after sunset, are above seasonal. That would be a -4. St. Laurent checking in at -8 currently. We've got 0, Morden, Winkler, but this Pembina Valley area was up around +2 today. -4 right now in Brandon, -1s and 2s around Dauphin and Swan River. And some milder air around Sprague. A little surprising because Sprague is just surrounded by, fields, and they're all covered in snow, so you'd think a lot of that sun would be reflected. Whereas you look at areas around Kenora, and there's lots of forest to attract the sunlight. So, yeah, temperatures right now just looking kind of seasonal or better. Across the north, with the snow today, we had temperatures slightly below 0 here in Flin Flon and the Paw, -6s and -7s around Thompson and Norway House, and -20 right now in the Churchill area, and some snow continuing, but it should wrap up around midnight or so. Look at the clear sky in the south. And there is the circulation around that low pressure center that continues to move out over Hudson Bay, but it continues to drag moisture off the bay and back into northern Manitoba. We do have a slight chance of some flurries mixed with some freezing drizzle in some of the areas around northwestern Ontario, specifically Kenora, Dryden, but just a few evening flurries around Red Lake and a chance of evening flurries in Fort Frances. The rest of us are under generally clear to partly cloudy skies in the overnight period, and lows reflect that. Close to seasonal, that would be -15, so can't complain about a -13 tonight in Winnipeg, but it is a nice clear sky and winds are getting very light. -16 in Brandon for an overnight low, -9 around Morden and Winkler, -14 in Swan River. And across the north, temperatures will fall despite the cloud cover and the light snow. Maybe another centimeter or so around Flin Flon, the Paw, Thompson as well. Gillam, you could pick up a couple more centimeters tonight. And this chance of light snow, where mentioned in the north tomorrow, is only about 30%. Just cloudy, chance of some snow in Churchill, high of -17. Highs around -6s and -7s for Thompson, Flin Flon, and the Paw. And then it is just going to be a gorgeous day here across southern Manitoba. You look at these numbers and you look at the amount of sunshine we're going to see and the light winds, and I think that outdoor activity will be abundant on Saturday afternoon. Planning on getting outside myself. You look at northwestern Ontario, hopefully no freezing drizzle, but tomorrow temps anywhere from 0 to +3 for daytime highs.
Thanks, Don.
You're welcome.
Coming up, an exhibition at the Mayberry Fine Art Gallery features works by both historical and contemporary artists, as well as the work of some locals. More after the break. The Mayberry Fine Art Gallery is celebrating Canadian women artists. We had a chance to take a tour of the gallery this afternoon. Have a look.
I'm Sean Mayberry from Mayberry Fine Art, and we're opening an exhibition celebrating Canadian women artists. We have on display 39 different artists, over 50 paintings and artworks on display. These two paintings are by Montreal painter Prudence Seward. Prudence Seward was a member of an association of artists called the Beaver Hall Group, which were based out of Montreal. Prudence was known for, both her depictions of landscapes, but often urban themed subjects. This is Kathleen Daly Pepper, another Quebec image. A lot of the artwork that was done back then was depictions of sort of landscape, homes, villages, and whatnot. And then we have another member of the Beaver Hall Group, which is Anne Savage. And this is a large formal work painted in the 1940s. The painting in front of us right here is by Rita Latondra, who happens to be another Quebec artist. Rita just passed away last year, but she was one of the early practitioners of abstract painting in Canada. The two pieces here are both by Rita Latondra, and they're done in the early 1960s. So we have Molly Lamb Boback, who was a maritime painter from New Brunswick. Molly started her career really as a painter in the primarily in the 50s onward. Molly is a part of a generation of artists that grew up probably learning about abstract art, took aspects of the way abstract artists work, but then was working in a more representational manner. The painting that we're looking at is by Dorothy Knowles, who was a very prominent painter from Saskatchewan. She studied early on watercolor, and so her paintings, and this would be done in oil on canvas, and the thinness of the way the paint is, she borrows the sort of transparency of the color from her love of watercolor painting. What we're looking at here is three paintings by Winnipeg artist Daphne Ojig. Daphne Ojig was a member of what is now known as the Woodland School. Her paintings are highly stylized, almost like a form of graphic art that has a strong concentration on line and color and form. We have three paintings by Winnipeg artist Dee Barzy. Her paintings are all about pop, lots of color, bright colors. The background color is known as Dee Blue. All of her paintings that she makes have that turquoise kind of tone blue as the sort of foundation color. On our feature wall, we have Gathy Falk, who was a Winnipeg artist who currently lives in Vancouver. Gathy is the oldest living artist currently in the show. She's 95 years old. This is a painting called Pieces of Water from a series of kind of landscapes that she was doing in the 1980s, which were essentially water views.
Look at our city from above as we head to break. When we come back, John Sauder has his 7-day forecast, and your daily lift is still ahead as well. Stay with us.
Well, I've talked about the mild weekend ahead. Check out Monday. Winds will shift and gust to 60, and a bit of a wake-up call temperature-wise. -8 on Monday, and it looks like right through next week, temps will be slightly below seasonal, at least for daytime highs anyway. You know, transit drivers, we see them driving by here all the time. They do their very best every day to get us all to work on time.
But this week, a Vancouver bus driver stepped up to make sure a rider was covered for being late. Here's your Daily Lift.
Good morning. My name is Graham and I'm the bus driver. I'm with Ying. We are at a big snowfall. No joke, no lie. The buses are stuck. The buses are ordered not to move. Just to let you know what's going on this morning. And just to verify, there's the message we received on the computer telling us to pull over and wait for the snowplows. So if she's late for work, I'm sorry. There's nothing we can do. There's absolutely nothing we can do. We're all stuck. So hopefully this explains why she may not come in today, but stuff happens. Sorry.
What boss could possibly watch that and be angry? Graham has now become a viral sensation, making transit drivers everywhere look great. They have to drive through a lot of conditions too. So
yeah, that's
good for him.
absolutely
Good for
right.
him.
Yeah.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Have a great weekend.
We'll see you.